Jimmy Washington, a 13-year-old boy known for his intelligence and kindness, was a favorite among his schoolmates. His heart was as big as his smile, and he had a reputation for always lending a helping hand. The son of Andre Washington, the town's newly appointed chief of police, Jimmy's life seemed to be one of ease and comfort. But today, Jimmy was filled with excitement because he was heading to his grandmother's house in the Oakwood neighborhood, a place that held countless fond memories from his childhood. The familiar scent of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air whenever he visited, and his grandma's warm hugs always made him feel as though he was wrapped in safety and love. Jimmy took his time walking there, savoring the cool, crisp air that blew through the trees. The sound of leaves crunching under his sneakers brought back a sense of nostalgia. As he hummed a tune that his grandmother used to sing to him, everything felt peaceful. The streets were calm. The world seemed at ease until something began to feel off. Turning a corner, Jimmy noticed two police officers walking a few steps behind him. At first, he didn't think much of it. After all, Oakwood was a safe, quiet neighborhood, and seeing officers patrolling the area was nothing out of the ordinary. But after a few moments, a sense of unease crept in. The officers weren't just casually walking, they were following him. Trying to brush it off, Jimmy glanced behind him casually. His heart skipped a beat when he locked eyes with the officers. Officer Grant and Officer Baker weren't just walking, they were staring at him, their expressions hard and unwelcoming. Jimmy's mind raced. What's going on? He wondered. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just heading to my grandmother's house. Still trying to push away the anxiety building up inside him, he continued walking, but the officers kept closing the gap between them. Their footsteps grew louder with each passing second, and Jimmy knew this wasn't normal. His thoughts raced as his heart pounded in his chest. Feeling a sudden chill, he reached for his phone and dialed his father's number. Chief Andre Washington, deep in the middle of reviewing case files at the precinct, glanced at his phone when it buzzed. Seeing that it was Jimmy calling, a wave of concern washed over him. Jimmy rarely called during the day, especially for something so simple as a visit to his grandmother's house. He quickly answered, trying to sound calm and lighthearted despite the gnawing feeling in his gut. "Hey buddy, what's up?" Chief Washington greeted, his voice steady, though the unease was evident. On the other end, Jimmy's voice was nearly a whisper, quiet and laced with anxiety. "Dad, there are two officers following me. They're acting weird. I don't know what's happening." In an instant, the chief's expression turned serious. He knew every officer in his precinct, and hearing his son's voice filled with uncertainty and fear was enough to send a surge of anger through him. He dropped everything, grabbed his keys, and rushed out of the station, determination in his eyes. Meanwhile, the officers had finally caught up with Jimmy. "Stop right there." Officer Grant's voice was gruff, demanding, with no room for argument. Jimmy's heart hammered as he came to a halt. He fought to stay calm, remembering all the advice his father had given him over the years. "I'm just going to my grandmother's house. It's just up the road," Jimmy said politely, hoping to defuse the tension. But the officers weren't listening. They exchanged a brief glance, an unspoken understanding between them, before Officer Grant spoke again. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? You don't look like you belong here." The words hit Jimmy like a punch in the stomach. What do they mean, I don't belong here? He thought, hurt and confused. This is my neighborhood. I've been here my whole life. He tried to explain, but the officers weren't interested. They bombarded him with question after question, not even giving him time to respond properly. "What's in your pockets?" Officer Grant barked, his tone sharp. Jimmy froze for a second. He wasn't carrying anything dangerous, just a small gift for his grandmother, a scarf he'd bought for her. His fingers trembled as he hesitated, unsure if he should even have to explain himself. But before he could answer, Officer Grant reached into his pocket and pulled the box out, shaking it in his face. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "It's a gift for my grandmother," Jimmy said, his face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. He struggled to keep his voice steady, but the fear inside him was growing. Officer Baker, the younger of the two, looked slightly uncomfortable. For a moment, It seemed like he realized they were crossing a line. He glanced at Jimmy with a brief look of sympathy, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He didn't say anything and followed Officer Grant's lead. Back at the precinct, Chief Washington's car sped through the streets, cutting through traffic as he raced toward his son. His mind was a storm of anger, disbelief, and worry. His son, being treated like this by his own officers? He couldn't fathom it. His grip tightened around the steering wheel, praying he'd make it in time. As the questioning continued, Jimmy felt trapped. He was surrounded by the two officers, their cold stares making him feel smaller with every passing moment. "I'm just visiting my grandmother," Jimmy repeated, pointing down the street. "She lives just up there." But Officer Grant wasn't buying it. "Kids like you shouldn't be wandering around here without a reason," he sneered. Jimmy's chest tightened, his voice barely above a whisper as he tried to stand his ground. "I told you, I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, his words edged with frustration. Just then, the screeching sound of tires interrupted their exchange. A black car slammed to a stop at the corner. It was Chief Washington. Stepping out of the car, his face a mask of controlled fury, he walked straight toward the officers, his presence demanding attention. The officers looked up, surprised to see their chief. "Chief, sir," Officer Grant stammered, his bravado quickly slipping away. The chief didn't waste a second. He walked right up to the officers, his voice cold and sharp. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The officers hesitated. Finally, Officer Grant muttered, "We thought he was acting suspicious. He didn't look like he belonged here." Chief Washington's eyes blazed with anger. "This is my son," he snapped, stepping closer. "He's visiting his grandmother. You assumed he was a threat without even asking a single question." His voice dropped to a dangerous calm, every word heavy with authority. Officer Baker's face turned pale. "We didn't know, sir," he mumbled, avoiding the chief's gaze. "You didn't know because you didn't care to find out," Chief Washington fired back. "Is this how you treat kids in this community? Would you do this to your own children?" The silence that followed was thick with guilt. The officers stared at the ground, shame written all over their faces. "From now on," the chief continued, his tone commanding, "you will treat every person in this community with the respect they deserve. Today, you made a grave mistake." The officers nodded in agreement, clearly regretting their actions. Chief Washington placed a reassuring hand on Jimmy's shoulder. "Let's go, son," he said, guiding him away from the officers. As they walked together, Jimmy felt a rush of pride. His father had stood up for him, and in doing so, he had shown the officers the importance of treating everyone with fairness and respect. While this wasn't the end of the problem, it was a step in the right direction, a step toward making Oakwood a safer and fairer place for everyone. And that, my friends, is the end of the story. If this story touched you, please hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to Unfolded Tales Explained and ring the bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Thank you for watching, and have an amazing day.